All right. Well, welcome everybody. Good morning. If you're joining us from the West Coast, it's morning for us. Stephen here is in Massachusetts, so it's good afternoon to Stephen. I'm so happy to be here together and to get to share Stephen with all of you. As you know, he has been one of our most formative, probably the most formative teachers around Dharma, and Andrea is going to share a little bit with you in a moment about why. So before we get started, I just want to point out the Q&A function that you will see on the side of your screen. And so if you have any questions as we move through our interview with Stephen today, feel free to drop those into the Q&A versus the chat. And we're going to have a little time at the end of our hour together to have Stephen answer those questions. And then you can also raise your hand and ask your question in person as well. So please either drop them in or save them for the end of the call, and then we'll get to it.
So for those who are new to our work or have yet to join in on a live class or workshop or retreat with us, I'm Andrea, this is Kristen. We are the founders of Dharma Laundry. And after years of just friendly contemplative conversation, just two girls getting together, mostly during COVID, talking about the meaning of life, we started to wonder what it would be like to open up the space for more seekers like yourselves who are asking those three perennial questions. Who am I? Why am I here, and how can I serve? And so we founded Dharma Laundry as a way to begin to play with those questions more purposefully. And our mission is to illuminate the divine in everyday living for those in pursuit of their Dharma. And this year we introduced wisdom classes as a resource to our community where we get to invite our Dharma teachers. And this today is a very, very special one to us, as Stephen's work, in particular, his book, The Great Work of Your Life, has been a central tenet of our shared work and the retreats that we host throughout the year. So Stephen Cope, I am so honored to introduce him. Stephen is the scholar in residence at Kripalu. He is the Kripalu ambassador and the founder and former director of the Kripalu Institute for Extraordinary Living. He is the best-selling author of many fabulous publications, including Yoga and the Quest for the True Self, The Wisdom of Yoga, Dharma in Difficult Times, and a book very near and dear to us, The Great Work of Your Life. Yoga Journal named Stephen one of the most influential thinkers, writers, and teachers on the current American yoga scene. And it is with the utmost honor that we introduce you all to Stephen Cope. Stephen, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Andrea and Kristen, and hi everybody from all over the hemisphere, perhaps. I'm in Massachusetts, as one of the ladies mentioned, and it's great to be with you. That's all I've got to say.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Stephen, for joining us. Did you want to start us off this morning with a brief grounding meditation?
Yeah, if everybody's willing, I thought we'd start with just a little meditation to kind of land ourselves. So take a minute, come into your nice upright seated posture for meditation. Let your eyes close. And take a big, deep breath all the way down into the belly. Let it out with a big, audible sigh. And with that audible sigh, let your shoulders relax away from the ears. Relax your face. Feel the touch of the sits bones on the chair or the cushion. And then one more time, take a big, slow, deep breath, as if you could breathe all the way down into the belly, fill the lungs, and then let it out with a big, audible sigh again. And now take a moment to just scan lightly through the body. Bring your awareness up to the brow, the big brow muscle. And notice if your brow's a little furrowed, let it soften. Let all the little muscles around the eyes be soft. The cheeks, the jaw. Let your jaw relax. And even the tongue and lips soft and relaxed. Feel the shoulders now, and again, notice if those shoulders are up around the ears a little bit. Let the shoulders be heavy and relaxed. Feel the right arm now from the shoulder all the way down to the fingertips. Notice any sensations, any tingling. Let the hand feel warm. And now the left arm from the shoulder to the fingertips. Relaxed, at ease. Feel the rising and falling of the breath in the chest. Notice all the sensations of breath in the chest, in the belly. And then feel the hips and the sits bones landed on the chair or the cushion. Feel the legs from the hips down to the feet. And let the legs too feel relaxed. Let the whole body feel very much at ease. The body is at ease. The mind is at ease. Everything is okay. Now, if you'd like to, you can join me in chanting 3 rounds of Om, the sacred syllable. And as we chant, feel the Om really reverberate through the whole body. Let your eyes remain closed and feel the reverberation of the Om inside. And then slowly let the eyes flutter open, taking in color and light, and fully arriving right here in the group. Okay, gang, Jai Bhagwan, as we say for Pollock.
Thank you so much, Stephen. What a beautiful start. So nice to ground ourselves and to receive that from you. So much appreciated. So to begin, again, I'm Kristen, and we're really centering a particular book of Stephen's. As Andrea mentioned, he's written a number of books, and this book, which I know is backwards for you right now, great work of your life, has been our core text for our shared collaboration, and it is one of the most formative pieces of work that we could imagine to help us get acquainted with this other formative text, the Bhagavad Gita. So just to tell you first a little bit about Stephen's book, The Great Work of Your Life, it explores this idea of discovering and living into your true purpose, what we call Dharma. And it's inspired by the teachings within the Bhagavad Gita, which is an ancient Hindu text, philosophical, spiritual text that we're going to get into why this is still so relevant today. But he illuminates these teachings through different stories about historical figures that we're all familiar with, like Jane Goodall, Harriet Tubman, Henry David Thoreau, and then also everyday people like us, people that Stephen knows personally, just to illuminate these teachings and help illustrate how we, all of us, can find our own unique path in life. It combines spiritual wisdom, as I said, but also practical applications and practical advice. So it's really a wonderful book to encourage us to align our actions with our calling, and also how to face challenges and live a life that is filled with meaning and purpose. So to begin our conversation today, Stephen, I'd love for you to just acquaint us with this book, the Bhagavad Gita, and share a little bit about why modern folks like us might be interested in it today after it's been around for so many, many years.
Yeah, since the first century of the BCE, it's been around. So the Bhagavad Gita, probably most of you know, is the most well-known scripture in Indian Hindu culture. It is a dialogue between the divine, between God, Krishna, who's an avatar of Vishnu, and a kind of a struggling human being, Arjuna. Arjuna is he's the greatest archer in the kingdom that the book deals with, but he's also very neurotic, so very much like us. And this is a character that Woody Allen could have invented, because he's full of doubt and wonder, and he doesn't know what he's called to do in life. So through this brilliant dialogue, we get to see a lot of the most sophisticated ideas in early yoga and Hindu culture about meaning and purpose. And I think it's the most well-known scripture in India because it's so practical. A lot of the scriptures that we read, like I'm a yogi, and a lot of the scriptures are highly metaphysical. This one is really practical, right? So prior to the Bhagavad Gita, a spiritual life in India was considered to be a life of renunciation, a life of giving up, a life of inaction, if you will. Just before, around the 1st century BCE, what arose out of a 1,000-year tradition was this amazing scripture, which offers you a way to live a passionate life in the world, right? In the marketplace. We're not going to be monks and nuns. We're going to live in the world. And so these teachings become the basis of something called karma yoga, which is the yoga of action, the yoga of service. And it remains so incredibly relevant today. And I teach it a lot because everybody is so hungry to find a map for this big problem of what am I called to do in this life? And I found this map 20 years ago when I began really studying the great Hindu texts. And as I said to Kristen and Andrea, it's very alive with meaning for us in this century.
Indeed, indeed. How would you, excuse me, we're all experiencing a little.
I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm sucking on
No
lozenges.
problem. How would you define Dharma for those of us who might not be familiar with the term? And can you clarify for us, as part of that, the difference between, how it relates to our paid work?
Yeah. So Dharma is one of these Sanskrit words that's many layered, okay? For those of us who study Buddhism, we'll often hear the word Dharma, which means path or truth or teaching. But in the Bhagavad Gita, in this particular text, the word Dharma always means sacred calling, true calling. It's based on an ancient Hindu myth called the myth of Indra, which I'm going to explain to you because it's so revelatory about what Dharma really is. So Indra, for those of you who don't know, was one of the great gods of the Vedic pantheon 1,000 years before Christ. And like all these gods, he lived on a mountain. He lived on Mount Meru. And it was said that Indra had cast a vast net over the entire universe. And at the warp and woof vertex of all of those threads is a gem, an individual gem. And that gem is a soul. And it's that jewel, that gem's job to hold together that part of the web. So the idea here is that your calling, your little corner of the world, what you're called to in your corner of the world, has to be manifested by you and by you only. And if you don't manifest your Dharma, then this whole web begins to come apart from your section of it, right? So from the very beginning of the Gita, you get this beautiful connection between individual fulfillment and the common good. So the common good cannot be fully fulfilled unless you fulfill your Dharma. The word Dharma comes from the root DHR, which means to hold together. So our practicing, our manifesting, our calling, our Dharma actually holds this whole thing together, even though we're just holding together a little piece of it, but that turns out to be absolutely essential. So Dharma it's a great compact word.
And given that this corner is so critical for us to hold together, how do we figure it out? This is a question we get a lot. How do we discern our Dharma?
So at the core of the scripture, Krishna, who's an avatar of Vishnu, of God, teaches Arjuna, our neurotic friend, that there are 4 pillars of Dharma. The first one is discernment. That's what we're about to talk about. Discern your Dharma. Find out with a lot of clarity what you're called to. The second one is, once you've discerned it, now do it full out. Do it, lay all your cards on the table, bring everything you've got. This is the passion part of Dharma. You live a passionate life when you're doing your Dharma. So discernment, then do it full out. The third pillar is let go of the fruits. That is to say, let go of the outcome. Krishna says success or failure for you in the eyes of the world is not your business. Your business is only, are you doing your Dharma? Are you doing your calling? You have to let go of how that manifests, whether it feels like success or failure. And then finally, says Krishna to Arjuna, turn the whole thing over to me. That is, let this experience of living your Dharma live on the stream of love that exists between the individual soul and the divine. Or if you don't believe in a divine soul, then in something bigger than yourself, right? So turn it over to something bigger than I, me, and mine, than the ego. So 4 pillars: discern your Dharma, do it full out, bring everything you've got to it, let go of the fruits, and turn it over to God. Now that's what Krishna teaches Arjuna in these 18 brilliant chapters. It's a very short book, and it's really poetry. It probably manifested itself in the 1st or 2nd century BCE. But as I said, it's become, if you go to India and travel around to all the temples, almost everywhere you'll see Krishna and Arjuna, right, in the chariot heading into battle. And so it's an archetype of the human beings wrestling with meaning and purpose.
And isn't the battlefield itself also a symbol of our life and
It's the battle of life. mean, that's really what's happening here. So that, you know, even though in the text it's clearly a battle, many of the most astute commentaries say that it's not a battle of violence, but it's the struggle of living fully. So Gandhi, for example, who wrote a brilliant commentary, said this is, you know, this is not about killing. This is not that kind of battle. It's the battle of that we wage every day in terms of making choices, making commitments, following through, and so forth.
Yeah, and this brings us to, I think, one of the juiciest and most arresting pieces of this, which is doubt. And you know, I've heard you say that the Gita is a parable. The whole book is a parable of doubt, and not doubt. Just to clarify for those of you who haven't studied with us before, but not doubt is healthy skepticism, because we all need to practice healthy skepticism. But the kind of doubt that keeps you stuck, the kind of doubt that, as Stephen says, causes you to put your lawn chair at the middle of the intersection and take a seat and never budge because you can't decide which path to take. So what can you tell us, Stephen? What does the Gita and what does your book illuminate?
But this is something I signed up for, but I'm
doubt and our relationship to doubt. How do we navigate that? So many of doubt.
It really is a parable of doubt and doubt and faith, because at the beginning of the book, the first chapter of the book is called Arjuna's Depression. Arjuna doesn't know whether to fight this battle that's upcoming or not. He doesn't know what he's called to. So at the beginning, he cries out to Krishna, who's his charioteer, but also an avatar of God. You know, I'm paralyzed by my doubt. I have one foot on one side of the intersection and another foot on the other side. And so doubt in the Gita is called the paralyzing affliction, because it paralyzes you from action. Now, many of us are frequently caught up in the problem of doubt. And I certainly have been. You know, I'm a writer primarily, and I get what I call Dharma assignments. So it becomes very clear to me after a certain amount of searching, oh, this is the next book I'm supposed to write. This is my new Dharma assignment. Once I get clear on that assignment, doubt goes away. I'm perfectly 100% oriented around, and I can bring everything I've got to the book. But then I go through periods of what I call wandering. Between those periods of clarity and certainty, when I'm not quite sure, what's my next Dharma assignment? The last book was great, but that's over. Now what am I supposed to do? And this period of doubt and wandering, for me, can last 2 years or so. I just recently figured out my next book, my next Dharma. But in the last couple of years, I've gotten very familiar with this stage when we're seeking, we're actively seeking. We have to live in the experience of not knowing and find ways to ask and listen all the time. Listen for all of the signs of our Dharma until we come to that certainty, which allows us to unify the self around our true calling. So, you know, in 20th century depth psychology, Freud discovered this whole idea of the divided self. Neurosis is nothing more than a self divided against itself. And we all have that. We all know what that feels like when you're divided against yourself, and it's very uncomfortable. However, it's an absolutely essential part of Dharma. All of us will go through it, and we need to find really exceptionally helpful ways of dealing with it. So I'm not talking about getting rid of doubt. I'm talking about riding the wave of doubt and the questioning and staying with the questions until the answers come. So doubt and faith are really flip sides of one another.
You just pointed to your new Dharma assignment. And I think one of the misconceptions that we bump into is that we have one Dharma and
Yeah.
we have to throw all our weight behind it. And if we don't find our Dharma, what are we left to wander miserably through our lives? So can you speak to that misconception? Because you speak regularly about the next assignment and then meeting that until it uses itself up and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of myths about Dharma. The most pernicious one is what I call the romance of Dharma. And in this idea, I have to leave my job selling insurance and go to Paris and paint, right? That's the romance of Dharma, the idea that Dharma is going to sweep us off our feet and be big, dramatic, and grandiose. And the truth is, most of us are already living rather close to our Dharma. And most of the work we have to do is sorting and aiming at what we know for certain to be our Dharma. So the process of like I say, sorting and aiming is a time when we're going to be full of doubt. Now, I mentioned to Andrea and Kristen before we started my newest Dharma assignment. Oh no, wait, I got to talk about myths. There are other myths, right? So the myth that your Dharma should be your work or your profession. No, not at all, not necessarily. My younger sister, her Dharma is raising her fantastic adolescent kid, and she's doing a great job and she's fully into it. That's not the work she does. She goes to an office during the day. Our Dharma is not necessarily our work in the world or our profession in the world. Another myth is that we can only have one Dharma, and that's not true either. You can actually have multiple Dharmas, even at the same time. Another one is that you have one Dharma in this lifetime, just as you said, and either you find it or you don't, and if you don't, you're screwed. And that's not true either. Dharmas arise, callings arise, and very often they mature and they end, just like my books. A Dharma arises, I'm sure it's very exciting. I bring everything I've got to it, then it's over, right? Now what? But every time I write, I learn something more. So each new Dharma assignment, each new stage of Dharma gets just a little bit more and more challenging because you've learned, you've matured, you've grown, your skillfulness has grown. So those are some of the many myths about Dharma. No, I wrote a chapter in the book that we're discussing called Think of the Small as Large, right? Which is from the Tao Te Ching. Think of the small as large. And the character I used in that chapter is Henry David Thoreau, who, when he finally realized his Dharma, realized it's very small. It's not big and grandiose. He went to New York City at the beginning of his career because he wanted to be a great writer, right? He wanted to go and be among the great literati who had their salons in New York City. He did, he went, he was a total failure, didn't work out. He finally felt called to go back to his little village of Concord, Massachusetts. And that's where he stayed for the rest of his life. And from that small town, from that little Dharma, his Dharma of writing about nature and being a kind of a natural philosopher, he let go of all of his grandiose plans, but he found his true Dharma. And as a result, of course, even though he only published 800 copies of his book in his lifetime, Walden's become a worldwide classic, and he's become a very important natural philosopher. So think of the small as large, and the rest of that shloka from the Tao Te Ching is think of the few as many. Think of the small as large and the few as many. That is to say, you may think, I'm only touching a few people. I'm not touching the whole world. This isn't big enough. Dharma should be big. Dharma is big when it's your own Dharma. Its very nature is that it reaches out and touches the world, but not through your ego, not through your ambition, but through the very nature of Dharma itself, it connects us all. So even if you're if you're a stamp collector, I use this in the book, and you spend your time huddled in your little office, if that's your Dharma, if that's your calling, then it's gonna find a way to reach out and touch the world, the web, the worldwide Indra's net.
Quick follow-up to that. You mentioned this question of like, now what? And a lot of the work that we do is like working with people, and we have our own stories around being in what I call that now what moment.
Yeah.
Is it possible? I wonder, could your Dharma, could a Dharma assignment be to figure out your Dharma?
Totally. And in fact, for most of the people who come to my courses, they come because they're stuck in the discernment phase.
Mm.
And all I have to do is reframe that for them and for you all. If you're in the discernment phase, then you do have a Dharma. It's seeking for your Dharma. And the seeker is one of the classic paradigms in Dharma work. So if you don't know, that's fine. You have to acknowledge that and then start actively seeking, listening, looking, talking, trying different things on, seeing what fits, keeping your ear close to the ground. So this period of listening is it's an absolutely essential part of Dharma. It's not as though, oh, we're done with that, we've got our Dharma. It will come back, right? That period of seeking, and you learn how to do it.
Hmm. Why do you think it's important? You've made this a central through line of your life, or it has been. Why is it important that we tune into our Dharma? What do we have to gain from being in relationship with it?
I mean, only because it's the most exciting way to live. And as soon as you get some certainty about this, there's a mystical component to this. And as soon as you arrive at some certainty about your Dharma and you start actually committing to it and doing it, the universe comes to your aid in ways that you could never possibly imagine, right? Like when I committed to writing my first book, which became a pretty big bestseller, I didn't know anything about writing books. But once I committed to it, everything started shifting around me, right? All of a sudden, things presented themselves that I needed. So you have to understand that the ancient writers who got a hold of this concept were mystics. They understood how powerful commitment to authentic Dharma is and how it draws in mysterious ways, the support of the universe, the world around you.
Something you point to in your book is the intersection where the gift meets the need, and you say the need of the times and the need of the very moment. And the times that we're living in, we have a critical election coming up here in this country in the next couple of months. How might we look at this season that we're all in through the lens of Dharma?
So I found it so useful to look at this through the lens of Dharma, because let's face it, there are dumpster fires right now all over the world. The world is a mess. And that doesn't mean to say that it hasn't kind of in a way always been a mess. But right now there's a profound sense of urgency around it. And very often this overwhelms us, right? Like, well, what can I do? Really, honestly, what can I do? What you can do is discern your Dharma, which is going to be all about your gifts and your talents. This is the intersection of the gift and the times. And you're going to find some little niche in your little world, doesn't have to be huge, where your gifts perfectly intersect with the times. So I'll give you an example. My most recent book on Dharma was The Dharma in Difficult Times. And what do? I'm a writer. That's my skill. That's what I can offer. So I felt called to write a book about how we manage ourselves in difficult times. And that's my contribution. It didn't change the world. It hasn't, that book hasn't even sold as well as the first book. And I think that's because people don't really want to think about difficult times. But your Dharma will almost, because of the Indra's web phenomenon, the jewel holding together that part of the web, when you get into the world of Dharma, you'll find that it will pull you toward the needs of the moment that surround you in your world, in your little world, just like Thoreau did. You know, and Thoreau's great essay on civil disobedience, which I write about a lot in the new book on Dharma, it changed the world. I mean, Gandhi read it, Martin Luther King read it, all of the great activists read on civil disobedience. Gandhi wrote that from his little hut next to Walden Pond in Massachusetts, and it reached out to touch the whole world. He was just using his own particular gifts. So yeah, the intersection of the gift and the need of the times, the call of the times. I write the chapter that I wrote about this is uses Walt Whitman as an example, because Whitman had just become a famous poet in the 1850s. He had written Leaves of Grass. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, I wrote to him and said, I greet you at the entrance of a brilliant career. Okay, he'd become famous as a poet, but the Civil War broke out. His brother was wounded in the Civil War, and Whitman went down to Washington, and there he encountered the suffering of the Civil War soldier, the call of the times, right? And he decided, rather than to follow the celebrity route of being a great poet, he was going to follow his calling to minister to the sick and wounded, suffering soldier. And he became what he called himself. He identified his own Dharma as soldier's missionary. He spent the rest of the war in the hospital tents, and it on some level it ate him up, but it was his calling. And so as a result, he wrote all this brilliant poetry about the war, including his great poem about Abraham Lincoln. He became the bard of the war. That wasn't something he aimed to do. That was the intersection of the gift and the times. And that's gasoline and fire when those two intersect.
I think that the story of Indra's net has been such a wonderful teaching to help us understand the interconnectivity
Yeah,
between not just the intersection of the gift and the times, but also the interconnectivity between self and the collective, and how when you do your work, that is simultaneously doing also collective work. Would you say that that's an accurate
yeah,
assessment?
it's such an important lesson for our culture, because we live in a very narcissistic world in our culture here in America, a world that's all about I, me, and mine. And, you know, my success or my great books or my brilliant career. The truth is that the um, the really most authentic way of living always calls you toward a concern for the times and for the whole, because we are so connected. So, you know, in Buddhism, for example, as well as in classical yoga, the craving and clinging for success and fame and celebrity and wealth is all seen as, those are seen as afflicted states. Those are seen as, they're called torments or kleshas or afflictions, from which we want to free ourselves. So it's a great gift to have this wonderful scripture emerging just now that points us toward our duty, our responsibility, our interconnectedness with the world.
Yeah, and I think too that, when we follow our passions and we show up with those passions in service, sharing it with the world, sharing it with others, that also helps to hone our own aim and to know ourselves better. And there's this sort of simultaneous showing up in your Dharma that also reflects back to you and gives you that greater clarity and that greater certainty.
Absolutely. When I finished my most recent book, The Dharma in Difficult Times, I was spiritually high for 6 months because I had done my Dharma, but in the process I'd made a contribution to the world that the world needed, in my estimation. And it points to the lesson that you can't really have authentic fulfillment without also providing fulfillment for the whole, right? The common good. This is what happened with Thoreau, right? He went to Walden Pond to have a writing retreat for 2 years. And because of his own skill and his own gifts, he got pulled into the call of the times, and he surrendered to it. He gave into it. And out of that, he wrote on civil disobedience and changed the world. It provided both profound fulfillment for him and also for the world. So those two can't be separated. We have this notion that they can be. I can have this great life and success and fame and money and have nothing to do with offering to the world. And that's not the view of the Gita.
Yeah, and then you're left with a sense of feeling impoverished on the soul level, right?
Exactly, no matter how much you get. In
Yeah.
Buddhism, this is called the hungry ghost. The hungry ghost is this figure with a big head and a teeny little mouth, because the hungry ghost is always hungry for more, more, more of I, me, and mine. But the mouth is very small, so it can't get really much in there. That's the hungry ghost.
Mm.
It's an archetype in Buddhism.
Well, we're going to open it up for questions in just a moment, but I have one last question for you myself, Stephen. I'm wondering if someone on the call today is feeling really lit up about our conversation thus far, what would you say would be the first step that they could take? Well, I'm going to go ahead and suggest that they buy the book, The Great Work of Your Life. But other than that, what would you suggest as the first step to take toward their Dharma when they get off this call?
Well, I have a very practical suggestion about that, and I teach this in my workshops. There are 3 what I call very productive hunting grounds for Dharma. 3 questions that if I were you and you're interested in this material, I would be asking myself. The first one is, what's lighting you up right now? What's lighting you up? Sit down and write your list about what's lighting you up, and do not censor it. Because very often Dharma can come in out of left field and we think it's something we shouldn't be lit up by. But what's actually lighting you up? Sit down, write that out, and see what's there. So that's the first question. Very productive and important. The second one is very different. The second one is this: what is your deepest duty? What is the deepest duty calling you right now? Duty, very different than lit up. Now, they can be the same. Very often they're not. So duty, Dharma is often translated as sacred duty. So the question is, duty, in my estimation, is not what's imposed on you from without, but what's called on you from within. So duty is that thing which, if you do not do it in this lifetime, you'll feel a profound sense of self-betrayal, right? Self-betrayal. This isn't about what your parents put on you or what society puts on you. It's about what arises from inside, duty, right? So I have certain duties that arise that have nothing to do with my lit up side, my writing side. But duty has an ardency and a lit upness that's deeper than that first question I asked you. So what's lighting you up? What's the most what duty is calling you with the most intensity right now? And then the third question is, what challenges are you facing in your life right now? Relationship, money, work, whatever. Very often our dharmas come to us through challenges, right? So, I mean, Andrea and Kristen got into this work because of their own challenges, right, with Dharma and their own investigation about meaning and purpose. So, look carefully. I wrote a chapter about this called When Difficulties Arise, See Them as Your Dharma. And I wrote that about a mentor of mine, Marion Woodman, who was probably the greatest feminist Jungian analyst of the 20th century. And she got partway into her career, she got bone cancer. And this fearless woman decided, okay, now that's my dharma. I'm going to bring everything I've got to healing myself from this cancer. She closed down her analytic practice. She did everything that she could find to heal herself from bone cancer. And she was healed. And she went on to have a brilliant further career. She and I taught together a lot. So look into your challenges and see if they might have at the kernel an opportunity that's dharmic, because very often they do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some wonderful questions that have been coming in. So I'm gonna just start at the top here. Shantae asks, you mentioned how Indra's net can fall apart at our jewel if we don't act on our dharma. What if we commit to dancing with doubt but never figure it out?
I've rarely met anybody who did a sincere, authentic dance with doubt who didn't finally come to some kind of certainty. Now, some of you will know the work of Thomas Merton, who was one of the great Catholic writers of the 20th century. He writes a lot about Dharma, though he doesn't call it that. He calls it God's will, right? But he said at the beginning of one of his greatest books, he said, there are some people for whom all of life's Dharma is about searching and never finding. That can happen too. There's no limits to what your Dharma can be. And it's not a failed life. It's like if you're a searcher and you spend your life searching and seeking, and you don't arrive at what I would call certainty or clarity about Dharma, then you've done your Dharma, essentially. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit circular, but I was thrilled to see Merton put that out there because I'm sure it happens, right? Didn't happen to me. And it's fine. I do know one person whose life is described that way. So Shanta, I don't know if that was helpful, but where are you, Shanta?
I'm here.
Oh,
Hello.
hey, hi, Shanta. Where are you?
Shantae.
Oh,
And
Shanta.
thank you for being here. Yeah, that did help. I think when I was thinking about the question, I was thinking about not even just me, but what happens to the rest of the world if I think that, okay, my dance with doubt has become my dharma, but really it's just because I'm still sitting in the intersection.
Okay. You know what? The very first thing is to identify, and this is true of all the afflicted states, right? In the contemplative traditions, the afflictions or the torments are greed, hatred, and delusion, right? And the first step in moving out of any stuckness in that is simply acknowledging, oh, I'm caught in greed, or I'm caught up in hatred, or I'm caught up in delusion, caught up in doubt. There's another list, which is called the 5 hindrances, which are also afflicted states: restlessness, sloth and torpor, grasping, aversion, and doubt. That's the 5th one of those. So the very first thing in wrestling with an afflicted state is to name it. Oh, you're at the intersection? You're folding chairs in an intersection? Name it. Oh, wow, I'm in an intersection here. Okay, That's the beginning, right? And then you start investigating, what's it like to be in the intersection, and what can I see from here, and what's calling me from out there? But just naming it, and it's like, okay, it's fine. You're in an intersection now, so your work is to work with that where you are.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Shantae, where are you calling from, Shantae? Where are you calling?
Seattle area.
Oh, is it raining?
It is not. It's actually quite nice today.
Good for you.
Thank
I'm in the front end of the house. We are married. I
Oh,
can verify
My
it's not raining out
husband.
here.
that's funny. Okay,
Good to have you with us, you guys.
Shantae, thank you. Good luck with your dance.
All right, another question here from Aaron. Aaron asks, can you speak to the sense of privilege that might be required to pursue Dharma?
That's a really such a good question. Dharma, let me just say that Dharma is available to everyone, right? Dharma, when we find people who are living their Dharma, and Marian Anderson's such a good example of this. I write about her in my newest book. Marian Woodman grew up in the bosom of a Black family in I believe in Baltimore. And she was gifted with a role singing in her choir, in the choir of the church, right? Which pretty much anybody could do who had a voice. And it was there that she connected with this calling to sing. And she found an amazing amount of support right around her in her community. And this is a case of somebody who's the opposite of privileged, who any of us now looking at Marian Woodman in her elder years would say that's a woman of privilege, but that's not how it started. It was actually her Dharma itself, her singing itself, which she treasured, valued. She got that it was her calling and she went with it. Okay. She had a lot of support, but there again, the universe kept conspiring to support that effort. And I think very often we look at like the characters in my first book, like take Thoreau, for example. Thoreau, was Thoreau a privileged guy? Yeah, he had a certain amount of privilege. He went to Harvard. That's an enormous amount of privilege. But he didn't play on it. Rather, he could have played on it, but he didn't. Rather, what he did was stick to his Dharma of writing in Concord, in his little shack, in his shed next to Walden Pond. And that called the world to him. Now, he never achieved any fame in his life. Walden only ever published 800 copies in his lifetime. Now it's in the multi millions, right? But in his lifetime, he was still a small, vulnerable, poor character, right? Now we look at him and go, oh, he was a great writer. I could never be like that. Well, that's not where he started. And that's not where most of the people in my books actually started. Most of them, their Dharma achieved fame, right? Not their ego.
That's one more question.
Was that Aaron? Okay, let's see who Aaron is. Did that help, Aaron? There's Aaron. Aaron's the colored hands reaching out.
Yeah, that was helpful. I mean, I think I still have some questions about just that, but I think that your response was really helpful. So thank you.
Good. Okay, Aaron. Where are you calling in from?
Portland, Oregon.
Okay, Portland. Wonderful city. Thank you for your question.
Okay, I think we are about at time, but I'm going to leave space for one more question. I think the questions are really important. This is a playful one, and I think an important one. Allison asks, I imagine finding your Dharma or Dharma assignment feels like a deep inner knowing or joy. She says, I'm curious, how does it feel?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about my most recent Dharma assignment, and it's all about joy. So this little dog, this little spaniel, came into my life quite by accident, was adopted by my best friend Brian, and then Brian couldn't take care of her. But meanwhile, I'd fallen in love with her. And I didn't have the capacity, or I didn't think I had the interest in having a dog. But the universe sent this little puppy to me, right? And it was a source of such amazing joy that it was a sign from the universe that this was Dharma. Okay. And so I, against all odds, even against my better judgment in certain moments, I embraced this dog. I took her on. I've had her for 3 years. She's now the love of my life. And my new book is about her. It's about these dharmas that come to us, that surprise us, and how powerful that draw is, when you feel it. And so much of Dharma discernment is trusting your intuition, your knowing, not totally your head, but your heart. Like trusting that, fanning the flames of that love and that joy, and letting it fill you up. And then, like this book that I'm writing on her, it's called Little Dog, Little Buddha, and it's kind of writing itself because it was a Dharma assignment, right? Let's see, who was that question from?
That was Allison.
That was
Hi.
me. Thank you.
Allison, where are you?
I'm in Portland, Oregon. Oh, and I'm in here.
Oh, hey, hi, Allison. Hi, Will. There's a bunch
Yeah,
of you in
thank,
Portland.
thank you. That really resonated with me because I just picked up a new kitten kind of
Oh,
like a month ago. So same. Yeah, thank you.
Th-
That's really
they have everything to teach us about being
Yes.
present for the moment. And I discovered in walking my puppy how not present I was on my walks, and how fully present she is. So I've been learning from her about being present for a walk. It's amazing what I've learned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same with my kitten. She sits on my lap right here, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to move. I'm just going to sit and feel her purring. Yeah, it's very much a practice in being present.
It's a practice, right? And especially here again, naming it, oh, you're my teacher. You're my little teacher. Now I'm going to be explicit about that. And now I'm writing about it, and there's so much to say, right?
Yeah,
Cool. Thank you.
that's what we call naming and claiming.
Naming and claiming. That's right. Exactly.
Well, we want to honor everybody's time, but gosh, Stephen, we just want to thank you truly from the bottom of our hearts for
Right.
showing up in your Dharma and
Ah.
creating all of your books. We highly recommend. We've read them all. We can't wait for the next one. But this particular gem has been such a gift, and you are such a gift. You are a venerable wisdom keeper, and what an honor for us to get to have this piece of time with you.
I'm thrilled to know about your work, you guys out there on the West Coast, and stay in touch. This is fabulous. I love Dharma Laundry.
Yeah, the
Love
divine is
that.
in the daily.
I love it. Okay. You know Jack Kornfield's book, After Enlightenment, The Laundry, right?
Yes.
Yes. Sometimes it's doing the dishes, and that is our Dharma that moment.
There you
Or the laundry. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for our second
Hey,
edition.
friends.
Thank you, Stephen, for being here. And to those of you who are in our world and in our community, we have some wonderful offerings coming out over the next few months. We have a new retreat, Return to Purpose, in March in Palm Desert. It is centered on Stephen's work, The Great Work of Your Life, and the 4 pillars of Dharma. We also have a 6-month women's group program starting in January. It's a brand new, never created from us before. We're so excited, and we will be sharing details about that in the next couple of weeks. All right, y'all, thank you so much for being here. Take care from our small corner of the world to yours. Be
Right back at you. Keep
Thank
keep that corner of your net together over there, you guys.
you too.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.